Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Jarman, I want to shift gears a little bit because I've got another issue that I have some concerns that has come to my attention and that we've been looking into. The Census Bureau knows that there's some degree of plurality within citizenship that is going to refuse to respond to any online or mailing efforts, correct?
I think that we know on all surveys there's always somebody.
There's always some degree of the citizenship that will not respond. It's also my understanding that after 6 attempts at contacting these individuals, that then the Census Bureau begins consulting with state, local records, as well as checking credit bureau data, that type of thing, correct?
So we do have a corpus of administrative records that mostly includes federal administrative records, but also some state administrative records as well, yes.
Okay. What credit bureaus is accessed?
I don't think that we're actually using credit bureau data for this purpose, but I can get back to you and
check into, because I've been told otherwise. And my question with that is, obviously these are publicly traded for-profit companies, and I want to know if the government is paying these businesses for data.
We have paid such organizations in the past, but for other purposes, for research purposes in 2010.
What authorization is there without consent from the individuals to access that kind of information?
We entered into a normal contract with these organizations, assumed that they have the authority to transmit that data to third parties.
Without permission of the individuals? So you can access credit records without permission from the individual?
So I don't believe that we got the whole credit record. I think we basically got information on their name and address.
Well, aren't there other places where you can get names and addresses besides credit bureaus? I mean, can't you go to the local electric company and find some names and addresses?
So electric company records are part of what these sort of third-party aggregators.
Yeah, that's one thing, and that makes sense. But going to credit bureaus is, I mean, even to get a credit check, you've got to have permission from the individual to get a credit check. It just greatly concerns me that potentially we're getting information without individuals having permission, granting permission.
So when we put this out for bids in the past, I'm not quite sure what we're doing right now on this, and again, I can get back to you on that. One of the things that we were trying to do with this sort of combination of, it was many different sources that included utilities and what have you, was to be able to know that a person was at a particular address at a particular time. So like on census.
Yeah, I get that, but I don't get the use of a credit bureau to get that information. I mean, you look at the disaster, for example, that we had with Equifax last year. You look at the disasters we've had with DHS and OPM and the VA, where there have been significant government breaches of data and information. What of any kind of assurance possibly could an individual have that the government accessing potentially, even if it's just name and addresses, there's other, how can there be any assurance that other information is not kept, stored, and potentially at risk?
Absolutely. I can give you every assurance that all of personally identifiable information that the Census Bureau obtains, whether it's from a direct collection or from an administrative record, is protected under Title 13 and used only for statistical purposes and not shared with anybody. Well,
don't you think that DHS would have said that their information likewise is protected, or the VA or OPM or any others? I mean,
I don't think that they have Title 13 of the U.S. Code that expressly forbids us from.
I would like, if you would, to dive into this a little bit further. There's a great deal of concern that I have with obtaining this information without permission from individuals, and why you do not need consent, or why you don't think you need consent from individuals to access credit information, and how secure that information is. It's just is an alarming fact that I want some information on.
So Title 13 of the U.S. Code authorizes the Census Bureau and, in fact, encourages the Census Bureau to, when it can, obtain data from government and private sources in lieu of direct collection. So we are encouraged by law to use other sources of information when we can.
Without permission of individuals to access, where no one else in the country is able to access that information, but you have consent.
So we are authorized under law to collect those sources of information.
Without consent?
you know, if a third party does not.
I mean, if you're gathering that information and you're not getting consent, then you are doing so without consent.
So we do not get anything from a third party that they do not have the authorization to share on forward.
Without consent of individuals. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired.